Welcome back to Maintenance Monday. In this video, I'm going to share my tips, my tricks, and things to avoid when setting up your bike for a gravel or bike packing adventure so that you can spend more time riding your bike instead of fixing the thing. These tips are in addition to your usual maintenance and checks that you should be doing to your bike on a fairly regular basis anyway. I'll kick things off with an easy one. Now, if you're using bike packing bags, you need to protect the frame anywhere that the bags are going to contact the paintwork. Otherwise, even after a short ride of perhaps an hour or so, you could have rubbed away and damaged that nice shiny paint. Another reason you can use clear tape could be on the head tube, for example, where some of the cables could rub away and again damage the paint. But also, you'll notice on this bike, we have a clear protective sticker running all the way along the down tube. This serves for a number of different purposes, but it mostly protects the paint from damage that could come from mud, grit and stone chips flicking up and damaging it. And if you look further down still, there's a hard rubber protector for the same reason. Oh, and by the way, when buying your clear tape, don't buy the super cheap stuff. Spend a little bit more money on it, it will last longer and have a better quality adhesive. If your ride is a bit more of an epic adventure, chances are you're going to be taking a lot more stuff with you. Now, bikes designed for gravel riding, all-road riding, audax riding, and just generally going on a bit of an adventure, you're going to have lots of threaded mounting points onto the frame, such as this point just here. Now, most of these will come with a bolt pre-installed in them or included when you buy the bike, but it's super important to make sure you use the correct bolt or fixing to go into that specific point on the frame. I'm talking in regards to the bolt length, the thread pitch, and the size of the bolt in general. If you try to use the wrong bolt, you're going to render that thread useless and could cause irreparable damage to your frame. Now, in terms of the bolt length, the reason you need to make sure not to use a bolt that's too long is because it could thread all the way through and start hitting and damaging on an internal component of the frame. This is important on all types of frame material, but particularly important on carbon fiber bikes, which could be damaged a little bit more easily. Best advice, thread the bolts in by hand, and there should be no need to use excessive force. Talking of these little fixing bolts, they've got a small thread and it's important not to over tighten. We're talking in the region of perhaps 5 Newton-meters or maybe even less. Often, this is printed onto the frame or the component next to where the bolt is. If not, it's best to take guidance from the manufacturer, so you can look that up online. Now, when it comes to tightening the bolts up, it's important that you get this right and that you have the equipment with you on your bike packing adventure to do so. Now, here is the little mini ratchet set, which I often take with me. And in this, we actually have a little torque wrench capable of measuring between 2 all the way up to 6 Newton-meters, which is perfect for lots of these small little fixings on our bike. It's also incredibly important to have the correct adapters to fit into all of those different bolts. Now, if you're unsure, it's worth taking a minute before setting off on your adventure to make sure you have all the right stuff with you. Oh, and if you're worried about stuff rattling loose, you can just apply some low-strength thread locker. Simple. Now, if you're using bike bags, pannier axle, or anything along those lines, to be honest, it's important not to overfill them. The bags and the fixings will have a weight limit as what is safe to carry before you run into the risk of starting to break stuff. And the same is going to apply for the mounting points on your frame as well. So it's important to check the specifics for the bags and the bike that you're using so you don't run into any trouble. When you're all set up and ready to go, chances are you're going to need to adjust your tyre pressures. That's because they need to be set in accordance with the system weight that you're carrying, not your individual body weight. So that includes the weight of you, your bike, your cycling kit, your helmet, your cycling shoes, and all of your accessories and bike packing gubbins that you're taking with you. Now, there's lots of handy charts online to give you advice on what pressure to use for the width of your tyre and your overall system weight. And then you can adjust your tyre pressures accordingly. Now, these are guides, so you can always tweak this a little bit, perhaps a little bit higher or lower, depending on the terrain that you're riding on. But it's important to also consider that when you are fully loaded up with all of your equipment, particularly if you're a bit of a heavy rider, to make sure you don't exceed the weight limit of the frame or the weight limit of the wheels, but particularly the wheels, because they're going to be carrying the whole weight. Now, depending on what you're taking with you and where you're going, it's going to be important to keep your stuff dry. Now, I appreciate if you're perhaps cycling through the desert, this might not really apply to you, but the easiest thing to do, put your stuff inside a plastic bag before putting it into your bike bag. Next tip, take extra lube. You do not want to be riding dry. I'm talking about your chain, by the way. So if your riding is going to be in extreme conditions, it's worth taking extra chain lube with you, either in a small bottle or you can decant your favorite stuff into a smaller container. Great for that, the little soy sauce bottles that you get with takeaways from some sushi restaurants. All you need to do, simply top up what's on your chain if you're riding in harsh conditions. And then finally, test everything out before you set off on an epic adventure. You don't want any of this stuff rattling loose or banging on your knees or your feet when you pedal it. And then in terms of safety, you want to make sure your bike bags aren't going to affect your shifting, your braking, or your steering. We don't want any crashes after all. So those are my top tips on bike packing. It's not an exhaustive list by any means. If you've got any tips of your own, please let me know in the comments section down below. And for more cool bike stuff like this, subscribe to GCN Tech and turn on your notifications so you never miss out on a future video. Right, I'm off to go on my bike packing adventure. Nah, I'm not, I'm gonna get lunch. Always lunchtime.